Greetings yet again. My name is Valentina Ortiz, owner of the YouTube channel Entropía de Valen and a spokeswoman for the Spanish Mistreated Men Association. I came here last year to tell you about the reality the Spanish people live in regarding men's problematics and the inattention of the institutions surrounding them. Last year I told you that Spain seemed like a feminist testing ground. Today it doesn't seem like it is. Today I can confirm that it is. In a mere year since the last time we spoke, what I consider the biggest historical setback regarding respect, rights, and the dignity of the male gender in this country has occurred. Today, in Spain, while from the institutions themselves the narrative that we still live in a patriarchy in our country is being pushed, where even our own equality minister has dared to compare the situation of women in Spain to those poor women in Afghanistan, men have been reduced to something akin to an animal, and I will explain to you how. To explain in detail where this misandric germ comes from, I would have to start by explaining what it is and how it works, our gender violence law. I explained this in my conference last year, so I won't bore you with the same details, but it can be summarized in 4 major points. Definition: Spain understands as gender violence any act of violence of a man towards a woman with whom he previously had an emotional relationship with, or something similar to it. Criminal disparity: men receive twice the sentence that women would receive for the same crime. The third point would be financial assistance, housing assistance, and legal aid. Women have access to endless aid and benefits just by filing a lawsuit, something that does not happen when a man does. And 4, proof of charge. The mere, credible, and non-contradictory testimony of the accuser is proof enough to convict you. Even with all this, only 20% of the lawsuits end up in a conviction. In that same 20%, where there is a conviction, 33% of the convictions are based merely on the testimony of the accuser, while another 58% are conformity convictions. It is common here in Spain for the public defenders themselves to urge their clients into accepting a conformity under the premise that if they don't do so, the situation may get worse for them. Let's go deeper on some of the problems that came up this year. Do you know what parental alienation syndrome is? Parental alienation syndrome is a child's conduct when following the divorce or conflicting split of their parents, one parent begins to refer to the other parent in negative terms. Here in Spain, the number of children that end up hating their fathers are in hundreds due to their mothers telling them things like, your father doesn't love you anymore, or your father will not visit you anymore, or even we have financial issues because your father doesn't want to help you. Despite none of these claims being true, while the other parent is the one who prevented contact. According to the criteria of the European Union, which I strongly agree with, this is a serious problem affecting thousands of children who deserve to be able to exercise their right to an harmonious life along their parents. Therefore, it deserves attention and dedicated study groups to further have a better grasp on this problematic. While this happens in the European Union, our country forbids it. Yes, you understood that right. If after a conflicted divorce, your ex-wife starts telling your kid, contrary to the reality of the situation, that you don't love them anymore, that you won't give them money, that you are not interested in visit them, and even that you don't care anymore about them, this will not be relevant in a trial. That cannot be pled to help you rebuild your relationship with your children, because Spanish judges are obligated to view your claim as violence against your ex-wife. Because in Spain, an adult woman has more protection than a child. The reason why it was allegedly prohibited in Spain is because the conduct does not conform the characteristics to be a syndrome. And therefore, to speak of parental alienation syndrome would be approve a conduct without scientific endorsement. Remember this. Remember this because this will be important in a few minutes. And even worse, this has been prohibited under the context of the known Rhodes Law, the Child Protection Law. Child Protection Law! But it doesn't end here, because also this law picks up a new concept, vicarious violence. A concept that has existed around the world for decades, but to which Sonia Vaccaro, a Spanish forensic psychologist, has given another definition: when you damage a child with the intention of harming the mother. A woman. Sonia Vaccaro's definition of vicarious violence does not have scientific endorsement either. However, contrary to parental alienation, denouncing vicarious violence is not prohibited, it is encouraged. And what differentiates parental alienation syndrome from vicarious violence? Well, to start with, Vicarious violence contemplates any act of violence towards a minor with the intention of harming their mother. It can range from direct attacks, failure to comply with the visitation or custody regime, speaking ill to the minor about the mother and questioning the affection she has for them, or even kidnapping the minor and take them away from their mother without her consent or knowledge. The latter is called parental kidnapping. In addition, vicarious violence has another peculiarity. It can only be committed by a man, while only women and their children can be victims. The parental alienation syndrome, or simply parental alienation, is based solely on the behavior of one of the parents trying to distort the child's perception of the other parent, speaking ill of him or her and questioning the affection they have for the minor, in order to get a negative reaction from the minor towards the other parent and therefore undermine their relationship. In this case, both genders can be both victims or perpetrators, and it's commonly understood that the minor is the one to be mainly affected by the situation, not their parents. Therefore, if we read between the lines, and it takes barely any effort to see what they have achieved, the same attitude of negatively intervening in the child's relationship with the other parent is reportable if it's the man who exercises it, but it's non-existent if the woman does it. All these issues, child abuse, parental kidnapping, parental alienation, these are behaviors that the National Institute of Statistics itself collect at a higher incidence in women towards their children than in men. Regarding parental kidnapping specifically, for example, there are more than 300 cases per year, of which almost the absolute majority of them are perpetrated by mothers. This year in Spain, we have witnessed a horrible case. The case of two sisters, Ana and Olivia, who were kidnapped by their father for several weeks. The devastating conclusion came to be when one of the sisters was found dead in the sea. This has reclined the debate in Spain about parental kidnapping, that, remember, mother exercised to a much greater extent than fathers. With a twist, in all of the media, women were portrayed as the main victims and men as the main perpetrators. In public television, they have even let slip the idea that it is precisely because of this type of cases that custody should go to the mother by default. 3 weeks prior to Ana and Olivia's case, another devastating event had place. A mother murdered her daughter in order to harm the father, her ex-husband. She left a note to the father after murdering the girl. "You are going to cry for your daughter," the note said in question. Nobody has spoken about this practically anywhere. Nobody has shown the mother's face on the media, as opposed to Ana and Olivia's case. Nobody suggested in public television that custody should go by default to the father to prevent this kind of situations. Nobody. Not even the Ministry of Equality gave their regards in social media, as opposed to Ana and Olivia's case. Nobody did anything. The following week to Ana and Olivia's case, another little girl was kidnapped by her mother. It hasn't been shown in any media yet. Just before these cases that I just have related to you took place, on June 2, a law for the protection of people with disabilities was approved. Who could be against this? Well, I am, and let me explain why. The advances against men's rights that have been installed in Spain for years no longer go unnoticed. There are many of us who have decided to stop tolerating these abuses, and every time a new one comes from the Ministry of Equality, it receives a wave of criticism from the public. So now what they do is place this change where they think we're not gonna notice them, like a disability law. This law reforms the Spanish Civil Code, exactly Article number 94, which, to no one's surprise, has nothing to do with people with disabilities. This article details the circumstances and conditions for a visiting regime to exist, and this article, until now, respected the presumption of innocence. This article allowed a father or a mother accused by their partner to have access to a visitation regime at the discretion of the judge, who would assess each case individually until there is a sentence. Considering that justice, while not perfect and open to failure, still is the best resource we have, this worked quite well. In fact, in Spain, there are a series of centers called meeting points, where parents who are being accused or going to a conflicted divorce can exercise their visitation regime in a controlled environment. These centers themselves can be subject of controversy because they denature and rarefy the relationship between the parent and the minor. But at the same time, they make visiting regimens possible in circumstances where perhaps if these centers were not available, they wouldn't exist. And for a father who has not seen his child for months, This is the panacea. Today, any accused man will automatically be taken away from their children. He will no longer be able to access a visiting regime. And if he previously had one, it will be suspended. Between the last and current year, inside the institutional feminist movement, in Spain we are governed by feminism, a very specific motto began to become popular: an abuser cannot be a good parent. If we did not live in the dystopian reality in which we live, that premise would make sense. However, it hides at the very least misandric intentions. It has been years since the plot of Juana Rivas began in Spain, a Spanish woman who was living in Italy with her Italian husband, Francesco Arcuri, with whom she had a child in common. Rivas used to go out at night and come back home drunk. In one of these instances, Rivas, while drunk, tried to wake the little boy up. Francesco, the father, prevented. This resulted in a two-way fight that ended up in both parents filing a lawsuit against each other. Both parents presented injuries. He even presented more injuries than her. However, in the midst of all this, there was a reconciliation. When he returned to her, he agreed to withdraw his lawsuit against her and accept the guilt of the lawsuit that she filed against him. They got back together. They had another child. Years passed. One day, this mother came with her two kids to Spain, taking them away from their father indefinitely, without his consent or knowledge. The children's father took legal actions against her in Spain, and much later, Juana Rivas was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the parental kidnapping of her two children. Even though this case is pretty much crystal clear, Spain and its feminism has embraced Juana Rivas as a lioness mama, a victim of a violence who protected her children from an abuser. All of this knowing that after the back and forth lawsuits, they both resumed their relationship and had another child. This mother obtained something unheard of: a 2-for-1. She obtained a reduced sentence by half, understanding that the crime of kidnapping her two children was the same crime, even though it had two victims. Her sentence was reduced to 2.5 years. In Spain, any crime with a sentence of 2 years or above is guaranteed to go to prison. Juana Rivas didn't go to prison. She went to a women's center where the inmates, who were not such, did not have cells, but rooms and activities. Today, the Ministry of Equality is asking her to be pardoned. And it is from this case, known to any person living in Spain, that the motto, "No abuser is a good parent," came to be. Driven by this reform in the Civil Code arose, where our government finally explicit how they understand this problem, without presumption of innocence. In Spain, as far as this issue is concerned, the mere fact of having a lawsuit filed against you makes you an abuser. As if it were not terrible enough to find a father who was falsely accused who, from now on, will be prevented from contacting his children, we have also another reality affected by this: the reality of men who are victims of domestic violence that are trying to get divorced. In Spain, female abusers threaten their victims in a way that, if they report the mistreatment they experience or divorce them, then it will be these very same female abusers who will accuse them of gender violence, since Spain guarantees them to win. Among other things, in the association for which I am today the spokeswoman, the Mistreated Men Association, this is one of the main reasons men call us. As I said before, from my point of view, this has been the worst year so far regarding men's rights since I'm involved in this subject. There is a widely used expression here in Spain that, accordingly to me, perfectly represents what happens with these issues: scandal covers scandal. When we are still emotionally recovering from the last curb stomp towards men, Yolanda Diaz, Vice President of our country and Minister of Labor, and Irene Montero, Minister of Equality, were bragging on social media about the first women-only signed agreement in Spain, the Equal Pay Law. The law aims to combat the unjust wage gap, which is a consequence of free choice. However, both the Minister of Labor and the Minister of Equality do not see it that way. This agreement established that different jobs with equal value must be equally paid. The assessment of what is conceived or not as a job of equal value has objective parameters, such as what the job consists of, what studies are needed, what are the working conditions, etc., but also includes parameters as ethereal as social skills, interpersonal skills, and problem-solving skills. Companies must expressly take into account all of these factors without underestimating any of them and without applying assessments that reflect gender stereotypes. It should also be ensured that women are not underrepresented in middle and higher job positions. Yes, that means that men can be underrepresented in those positions or overrepresented in the lower positions. All these will be assessed by the Institute for Women, dependent on the Equality Ministry, with maximum penalties of up to 180,000 euros if it's considered that the assessment is incorrect or sins of any of these flagrant errors. There is a part of the agreement, though, that supposedly should benefit men. Occupational risk must be assessed from gender perspective. Does this mean that they will recognize that 95% of workplace accidents victims are men and they will prioritize or work on their safety? Not at all. It literally means ending the myth that women do their jobs in safer environments. So, if your cleaning company has women cleaning offices and men cleaning windows hanging from rope 60 meters high, this agreement forces you to pay them the same amount of money. And I am not making this example up. The Minister of Labor herself, who signed this agreement, used this example. She said that giving hazard pay to men who carry out their work hanging from cables and ropes at a height of 60 meters is discrimination based on stereotypes, and that with this agreement that is going to end. Yes, giving men hazard pay for hazard jobs is discrimination based on stereotypes. A wage gap report in 2009 already established it. Paying a hardship plus for carrying heavy machinery, but not for using a mouse, is underestimating the work of women. That from now on will no longer be possible to do. But actually it does not end here, because one would like to think that despite what this agreement demands, labor inspectors would not enforce such atrocity. Well, you are wrong. The Progressive Union of Labor Inspectors itself finds it outrageous that a woman who mops the floor gets paid almost 100 euros less a year as opposed to the high-rise windows washer, the one who hangs from a rope 60 meters high. At the end of the day, according to what this agreement itself demands, they require more social skills because they are engaging with people all day, and men don't take more occupational risks. That's a stereotype that we must get rid of. A few weeks ago, at the end of August, this law began to bear fruit. There is a rising number of condemned companies. I will give you the closest example to the one we previously discussed. The condemned company is a cleaning and waste management company that operates in the streets of Telde, Canary Island. The company was condemned for paying women less than men for jobs of equal value. For more than 20 years, the company has considered 5 categories of employees: managers, foremen, vehicle drivers, pawns, and versatile pawns. For this example, we are going to focus on the last one, pawns and versatile pawns, and I am going to comment on the main differences between them. The pawn only works during the day. The versatile pawn must also work at night while ordered to do so by their boss. The pawn only acts as a sweeper. The versatile pawn must also act as a garbage collector when ordered to do so by their boss. The pawn is usually a woman, and the versatile pawn is usually a man. Street sweepers, normal pawns, begin their day at 6 a.m. They sweep streets, stairs, change garbage bags, and collect waste from the beach, and it is carried out by women. Garbage collector, versatile pawns, begin their day at 3 a.m. They go around town clinging to the back of a truck, collecting large amounts of bagged garbage and old furniture, and it is carried out by men. Well, according to the Superior Court of the Canary Island, these two jobs are the same and must have the same pay. The judge explained herself by citing the equal pay law, which forces her to evaluate this case according to what is considered a gender perspective, and then she went on to explain. In her words, when two jobs are of equal value, they should be paid the same. The first reason for conceiving them as jobs of equal value is that the names in Spanish of both jobs are similar, and therefore they have the same value. The second is that both jobs require a certain level of physical effort and attention, and therefore have the same value. The third reason is that the company has not clarified exactly what types of garbage are collected by the garbage collectors, nor has specified how much time they spend collecting it. Therefore, both jobs have the same value. Keep in mind this is an appeal, which means the judge has not spoken to the company, much less asked what type of garbage it collects nor how long it takes to collect it. The fourth reason is that both jobs are carried out on the street and that they have a similar level of responsibility and they require a similar level of studies. Therefore, they have the same value. Finally, the fifth reason is that theoretically both jobs could be carried out during the day if the person in charge wanted so. Therefore, they have the same value. Then, the judge says that since basically the functions of both jobs are the same, it is sexist to say that they are different jobs and that one should be paid better than the other. The egalitarian thing to say is that they are the same job and that they must be paid the same. Finally, she rules in favor of the sweepers and says that they must be paid the same as the garbage collectors. Mind you, she does not say that from now on sweepers have to go to work at 3 a.m., nor that they have to clinch onto the back of a truck, nor that they have to carry out all furniture. The garbage collector will continue to do that. What she's saying is that from now on, sweepers will be paid the same as garbage collectors, because that's equality. This judge has not lost her mind or hates men. She simply sticks to the legislative criteria. The Enterprise Equality Bulletin, published by the Ministry of the Presidency, literally says that two jobs can have equal value even if their conditions, their requirements, their responsibilities, and their level of effort are different. The only requirement for a job to be considered of equal value to another is that they have the same value. Textually, I am not paraphrasing. So, indeed, the perception of equality that both the Ministry of Equality and the Ministry of Labor has is that men, to earn the same amount of money as women, have to make much greater efforts, that in order to be paid the same as an office cleaner, may have to risk their lives, while women don't. 1 year in Spain goes a long way. Also, in June, the so-called trans law was approved, law that advocates for the right to self-determination of transgender people. This means that without hormone treatment, surgery, or gender dysphoria reporting, all you need is self-identification. During the entire process of making and approving this law, there was something that has had Spanish feminism divided: those who supported the law and those who criticized it. They criticized it because they knew what this could achieve. Any man can now register as woman to find equality and criminal parity with women. The only condition is to do it preventively and not wait to be falsely accused, because if you change your gender in the middle of a process of gender violence, you will still be judged as a male. Luckily, between many quotations marks, despite the opposition of one half, this law was approved, and there is already men doing the paperwork for the gender change. As I told you before, 1 year in Spain goes a long way. And in September of this year, yet another measure was approved to discriminate against men: the university law, in which, among other things, it is established that women will have priority over men when trying to find work in Spanish public universities, provided that there is an equal conditions of suitability. But contrary to what this new law stipulates, the rectors of public universities, and I too, consider that the principles of equality, merit, and capacity are the only ones that can be constitutionally applied in public services. And with that being the case, this is clearly a discriminatory measure, since there never is any equal footing, with the reality being that there is always a better qualified candidate in comparison to another one. Nevertheless, it was approved. Finally, I wanted to tell you about the Association of Abused Men and some of the actions that we carry out from our association. A little less than 6 months ago, this association, led by a lawyer who has been a victim of these problems in his own flesh, contacted me. He has been the victim of obstruction of ties with his children and is still suffering the consequences. After having solved his own problem as much as it could be solved, and after a lifetime of professional development, Antonio, the president of the association, took charge of this project with the intention of making sure that no other man would have to go through what he had. And in case there is no other option for them, make sure that they are at least as best advised as possible in order to be able to face the situation. This is how the association came to be. In our association, for which I am currently the spokeswoman, we advise anyone who calls us with a similar problem. Men who have been taken away from their children, who are prevented from exercising their visitations, whose children have been kidnapped by their mother, men who are victims of domestic violence that want to get divorced but whose abusers threatening to falsely accuse them instead, men whose children are being victims of violence or abuse by their mothers, men who are financially blackmailed and used as ATMs in exchange for seeing their own children. And I think that the majority of our cases can be summed up as such. In addition, we make professional referrals to psychologists, lawyers, experts, and detectives, among other things, with discounts, of course. We organize events, awareness campaigns, disseminate on social media, and we aspire to, in the future, also be able to offer housing assistance so that parents who have nowhere to go have a place to live and where they can exercise their visitation regime. Among the deeds we do in the association, we also file lawsuits. The last triumph we can boast about would be that just a few days after the recording of this speech, Pamela Valenciano, a Spanish monologuist against whom we have sued, will be giving a statement in court. Why? Well, this person, Pamela Valenciano, is an alleged survivor of gender violence who today is dedicated to presenting her monologue, Not Only Punches Hurt, a monologue of awareness about violence in different spaces. The monologue in question includes slogans and situations as confusing as these. Pamela, explaining a couple arguments she had, explains that the one who was her partner at the time, after the discussion, remained silent. She insisted on talking, but he was silent for up to an hour. Then she explains, open quotation mark, "Don't you just want me to non-violently hit him? When I hit my partner reacted with pain. Don't you want me to hit him 26 more times? Because my cop had one goal, make the dude talk. And since he doesn't, I will just beat him up," close quotation mark, just for keeping quiet in the face of an argument. Can you imagine what would happen if it was a man who said this instead of a woman in a violence awareness monologue? But keep in mind the details, because I haven't told you the worst part of this monologue yet. Another one of the famous hits that can be heard in her monologue is that all of the men who call themselves abused are actually abusers. I ask you again, can you imagine a man claiming to have suffered violence from his girlfriend in a violence awareness monologue, saying that all of those who call themselves abused women are abusers? Well, here comes the plot twist. These monologues are exhibited in public schools to underage students in the context of violence awareness. Can you imagine that within the public of this lady, in a school, there was a teenager who is mistreated by his girlfriend? Because unfortunately, she has presented this monologue so many times in so many schools that, surely enough, the previously described situation must have occurred at least once. From our association, we saw this as unconceivable. The image of our underage teenager who is forced to listen to this at school came to our mind, where he is being a victim of violence by his girlfriend, and that if he is gathering the courage to talk about the violence he's suffering and ask for help, when he hears this person say in his school that all the men who call themselves abused are abusers, we will probably be discouraged from doing so. Discouraged because he would be afraid to being accused of being an abuser if he talks about all the violence and mistreating he's suffering of. Well, we sued her, and after a couple of months, we received the news that the lawsuit was admitted for processing, which means that this person will have to testify in court to be held accountable for the things that she herself has said. We were very happy about this news. Lawsuits against Pamela were filed before, but previously to ours, none of them had been admitted for processing. This one was. This lawsuit has been admitted. We saw a little ray of light at the end of the tunnel. It made us feel that there is still judges who look out for the greater good of all people, and that they do not give in into social pressure that exists today regarding these problematics. We celebrated through our social media, but after a couple of hours, it all then started. Suddenly, without having digested it yet, nor have previous warning, we were the bad guys. How could we be the bad guys? What have we done wrong? Has no one realized that what this person says in her monologue cannot be forcibly exposed to minors in an educational context? Weren't we asking for the minimum, which is basic respect for abused people, and that hitting your partner for being quiet during an argument should not be justified in front of teenagers? Pamela was the first one. She herself, the protagonist of this lawsuit, showed her consternation on social media because the lawsuit has been admitted. Later, she began labeling the people who expressed to her why they thought this lawsuit was a good thing as harassers. And that was just the beginning. Her followers started filling our social media comment and mailboxes with not so pretty messages and replies. They even went as far as accusing us of being an association of abusers, calling us crybabies, calling us scoundrels, calling us sexist, misogynistic, violent, fascist, They pointed and unloaded the whole arsenal to us, and we had no idea that it was only the beginning. Public figures, actresses, actors, famous people of all scopes, politicians from different parties seeking profit, all of them were rapidly involved in giving her support. And a few hours later, the Ministry of Equality herself did too. Irene Montero, the Ministry of Equality of our country, did just that. She supported a person who says these kind of things in front of minors in public schools. What's more, she explicitly said that Pamela's monologue was very necessary in Spanish schools. If these are the words of our very own Minister of Equality, then may I ask, what's left for us? The main new portals of our country also have made themselves echoed. Were the statements that this monologuist wields in her monologue made news and was the reason of why it violates the dignity of men explained? Not at all. This case has been labeled as the harassment of the actress and activist Pamela Palenciano returns, this time in the form of a lawsuit. Yes, according to these media outlets, which have not been few, to file a lawsuit against a person who tells teenagers that all of those who claims to be abused men are abusers is harassment towards said person. There have been also countless opinion articles by well-known columnists and feminist activists such as Cristina Fallarás or Beatriz Jimeno, explicitly referring to us as beasts and false mistreated. None of these people approached to the association to see how very real the cases we handle are. Everything that I have told here today, I am telling by way of public denunciation. It seemed important to me to take advantage of this opportunity so that people from all over the world know what we are experiencing in Spain. Because the media have become so secretive regarding this issue that if it depends on them, I am sure you will never find out. Spain needs support. Spain needs international help and visibility. They are destroying the humanity of every man and male child in this country with impunity. They are stripping them of any hint of dignified treatment. And this is no longer a slogan, nor a motto, nor a way of expressing it. What I'm going to say next is literal. Spain is killing them. Spain today has a figure of 10 suicides a day. 80% are men. You can follow the association on social media by looking for us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at ASOC Maltratados. You can also follow me on YouTube as La Entropía de Valen or on Twitter as Entropía de Valen. Thank you very much.